Hello friends, it's time for another story event. I'm Sergio Paez and I got with me today Chad Pickrell. Hey Chad, what's up my friend?
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
All right, man, we got a crowd that's forming here. You guys are excited. Wow, it's so awesome to see everybody. Thanks for joining. This is really great. So happy May. May the Force be with you, Chad. And today is Revenge of the Sixth. So we are going to be talking about how to board out a lightsaber battle. Now, I guess, well, let me introduce you, Chad, because Chad and I run the mentorship program where we train visual storytellers on how to become pro storyboard artists. And Chad's the moderator there and the team leader for the mentorship. So you're going to help me co-host this event and just help guide us, which is going to be great. But you're also a storyboard artist and filmmaker. Maybe you can tell people a little bit about what you do.
So I've been working on and off, well, not on and off, but I've been working within the industry for about the last, 15, 20 years. I actually started in music, ended up going into making films, being a designer, being a cinematographer, going up through there before finally landing in on being a story artist. I've been a story artist for about the last 8 years. And actually, the mentorship that Sergio talked about, I was one of his original students. And so I'm from there, ended up learning even more. I've boarded, I've done cinematography, camera operating, assistant camera work for a couple of features, but I've also storyboarded for a couple of features as well. One of which is currently in the middle of going through its film festival circuit. It's called Central Valley. So if you guys happen to see it in a film festival near you, check it out.
I had a chance. Kick-ass film. You guys should check it out. It's really great. Well, thanks, Chad. Thanks for coming on here today. I just wanted to point people, hopefully you guys are seeing us on our event page. This is what we put together, and there's great conversation going on in this chat right now. So there will be time for questions. Please, introduce yourselves. This is all about networking and building the community as well. So great. We're so happy to have you here. And if you scroll down the page, we're going to be talking a little bit about what this is. Now, I'll explain this in a little bit because I brought out something from the archives, and we're going to talk about how to break down a lightsaber battle, and those references there. Now, because of copyright rules and stuff like that, I don't want to play this because we have to be YouTube friendly for this presentation. But this is there on the event page for your reference, okay? And if you guys see this after the fact, we can make those links. We'll put that on the page after the event. But this is from an episode that I worked on with a battle between Dooku and Ventress. And then I used a reference from Samurai Champloo, which I'll explain a little bit about that inspiration. But below this, now some of you have already seen this, so it's great. I saw some questions coming up in the chat about what this is about. I did a little demo how to set up Photoshop for doing storyboards, and I'll explain that in a bit. And just as Chad's intro, there's a little bit about me. I'm a storyboard artist, and I've worked on the Star Wars franchise. And then the big favor that we want you guys to do right now is go scroll all the way down and click those share buttons. Do us a huge favor. If this is going to be valuable to you, tell your friends about it. We want everybody to come in and build up this community, and that's going to be really awesome and helpful for us. So let me bring up Photoshop first, and I wanted to show you basically what I did. I want to show you the starting steps for what we do here is thumbnails, right, Chad? Like most of the time when we get in this, we got to rough it out somehow. Now this is really small. I'll blow this up in a minute. But I have the originals that I dug up from my archives. And this is on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, okay? And it's done, these are really small, okay? Like you can see how many fit on a sheet right there. Hopefully, somehow my camera's gone dark. There we go. And it's got the auto exposure on. So anyway, like you see that it's there. Some of it's a little bit out of focus, sorry. But anyway, I just wanted to show you, and then look at this kind of stuff. There's Post-it notes on here, okay? Now, so I'm not perfect. I drew on the back, all right? Look how sketchy and rough this stuff is. This is something that I would not show anybody, but I just I roughed it out and did it that way. Now, this is what I'm what I actually had to pitch to the director. And in fact, on this sheet, this is, part of the thumbnails. Again, there's like Post-it notes that I corrected. I'm pretty sure I did this. And there was like a shot that I wanted to fix. So instead of like, erasing or redoing the whole thing. Now these are notes from the director on the episode. Giancarlo Volpe was a really awesome artist and director. And anyway, I'm sure he had some notes there, and it seems like screen direction notes and correcting what's going on or just explaining more what happens. So this is how we break things down when we're doing most of this stuff. And now let me bring up the slides, because a lot of you guys have questions about how to board out. Let me see if we can add this to the stream. Here we go. Now, boarding out a lightsaber fight, let me move our cameras down below. This might be easier there. Is a really challenging thing to do, right? Chad, you've done a bunch of action, right? And I've done my share of it too. Now, I think everybody seems to like enjoy the action part, right? Like it seems like it's more fun doing action than just like a dramatic scene or something like that. In fact, I probably never asked you, what's your preference when it comes to doing either like drama or action in any of these?
I don't have any particular preference, but although I do highly enjoy highly enjoy doing action, just because it's very active in comparison to doing like a drama where you're doing like a talking scene or a dialogue scene. There are some very definite like challenges that come with doing drama and doing talking head stuff, trying to keep it interesting. But with action, it's always been very active. But I'm particularly, when I deal with my action, is I love doing it with action comedy, because I love building in little moments that make you either laugh or really bring you into everything through that's within the action, right? Because I think one of the things a lot of people get caught up with in their action, they always go, man, why is my action falling so flat? A large part of the time that tends to come down to not giving yourself time to breathe and create little moments that you can connect with your characters on, because the more you can still connect with your characters and empathize with them in your action sequence, the more effect the actual action is going to have.
Yes, I love it. I was going to say the same thing. It's got to mean something in the action. That's the key here, right? If you can take anything away from what we're going to be talking about, it's really that. A lightsaber fight that we're going to break down, I'll show you this in a second, is the same thing as a sword fight. Even if you can think of it as a boxing match, it's a duel between two characters, right? And you hit the nail right on the head there, Chad. It's like, it's got to mean something in the purpose of the story. Otherwise, the action is going to be boring. And maybe it's visually interesting, like, because you just make it so cool. Okay, that's also one of the goals. But just like some of these big visual effects films that we've all seen, right? I'm not going to call out these movies that sometimes are just, they have big expectations, but there's just nothing there because the characters don't really sit with you, or the purpose just seems so nonsensical. But if you actually make it mean something within the fight, then that fight takes on a life of its own. Okay, so that's a really important principle to keep in mind. And then, well, let me get to the slides, and then what I bring this up here, okay? So basically a fight that we're going to choreograph, whether it's Star Wars or not, has to do with two dueling characters, okay? So what's some of the basic foundations that we need? Okay, you have to have strong drawing skills. We're talking about storyboards and visual storytelling, and the way that we represent our product here is by actually drawing out little pictures, okay? This is how we do it. And so by doing that, we need strong drawing skills, all right? That's some of the foundation. We're also going to need some digital techniques, right? Did you want to add to that, Chad?
Yeah, to that, I think when we're talking about strong drawing skills, I think we need to define what we mean by strong drawing skills, because we're not talking strong rendering skills. What we're talking about in drawing skills is we're talking about things like composition, things like movement, flow, gesture, things that are a lot more. They're not necessarily something where you have to take something to a full completed drawing like you're going to have in a comic book or in an illustration, but more that we're going to have clarity. And that's I think the biggest important thing, being able to have good perspective, good composition, and good gesture to be able to allow your scene to breathe, have some depth, and be able to move through your story.
Yeah, I'll show you exactly what Chad is talking about, because the stuff I'm going to show you is not very finished. You might say, "Wow, looks like a kid drew that, Sergio. Like, you're supposed to be a professional." But no, like, the point is making a clear drawing. Now, how you make a clear drawing, you need to have good drawing skills, okay? You may not have to show it off. Like, I don't like sit there and render something to make it pretty for everybody, which, I can if I want to. Like, I like doing that, but I do that on my own. I'll do a portrait or something like that, on my own time. But when I'm doing a storyboard, I have to make it simple and clear. Chad just said the key word there, make it clear when you're doing this stuff, especially for action, okay? So great point there. With digital techniques, I'm gonna show you one method today, which is using Photoshop, okay? The reason I picked Photoshop is because I think it's a pretty universal program and most people have access to it. Now, there are some free programs out there, and there's some other paid programs like Toon Boom Storyboard Pro is a really good one. There's Autodesk Sketchbook. I mean, there's a ton of them, right? But I think Photoshop seems to be the basis, and you can do it my method. I'll show you an interesting way of doing it, and you can do it your own way. It doesn't matter as long as the results are there. Okay. So that's the digital techniques. Now, familiar with action and fight choreography. This is the one that I think you and I have fun doing, right, Chad? Because what I'm referring here is to research, is really actually watching films and watching movies. And this is where, I could point you guys to, let me go back to this and back to our event page where I have that reference there. Now, you guys can click on that link on your own if you want to, and you can see what we're going to be talking about in a second. But this is reference that I pulled up with the Samurai Champloo and also the finished product with Dooku and Ventress. But at any rate, you have to do your research and you have to understand these things if you're going to do any kind of fight. So, do you have any favorites, Chad, for as far as like action movies or action fights that you go to?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple of really really good. If we're talking anime, you have the Samurai Champloo one, which is the action in that thing is insane. But there's two other ones that I particularly like. One is early Dragon Ball. Not, I mean, don't get me wrong, the later stuff is fine, Dragon Ball Z and stuff. But the early Dragon Ball where they actually slow the action down.
Yeah.
If you guys want to see action with storytelling, go and watch the Budokai Tenkaichi tournaments that they do in the original Dragon Ball series, because they do a lot of storytelling that's built into the fighting, which is insanely cool. The other one that I really like when we're talking anime wise is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Has some of the most gorgeous, meaningful action sequences I have ever seen. It is absolutely fantastic. If you've never watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, go watch it. It is an unbelievable anime series. And then as far as films and stuff are going, a couple of people have mentioned Jackie Chan stuff. There's some good Jet Li stuff that's out there. That's really, really good.
Yeah, those are classics. Bruce Lee, of course.
It really depends on the type of action that you're trying to do. If I want grounded action, one of the first things I'll go and watch for grounded action is the original Die Hard. Like the action of just grounded, just pure fight sequence. You're not going to get any better. It's one of the most realistic action, fighting I've seen in film. Is stuff like that, right? Or if we're talking chase sequences, things like Bullet is good if you're doing a chase sequence. Baby Driver's opening sequence is probably one of my favorite action chase sequences of all time. Things like that, right? It's just there's so much good material out there for you to find and utilize in research. And we definitely mean research and utilize. I don't know how many times I've seen the Akira bike slide in film. Outside of Akira nowadays, it's like we straight up take that and be like, this works in context of what we're doing. So.
Yeah. So all of that stuff is there, and we'll be referencing that. And there's a reason why I picked Samurai Champloo, and I'll show you in a second if you haven't caught already why. But the last thing I'll say, there's originality. You have to come up with your own things and do that. And actually, yeah, I was going to point out, thanks Midnight Watch, John Wick, like some of the recent stuff. There's some really great action in the John Wick series that I really like. Even going back to Matrix and stuff like that for Keanu Reeves, Kung Fu. But okay, so a basic action method. Now I'm going to get through this quickly because the time is going to fly here, really, Chad. Because when I get to drawing, it's going to like slow down a bit. So I want to get to this as quick as possible, and then show you my technique, and then we'll get to questions. We're going to try and do as many questions as we can towards the end. So hold your thoughts there, guys, and we'll get to it. So basic action method. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is communicate with your team. That's what this thing is for, okay, is doing thumbnails and doing a lot of roughs, okay, and I'll talk a little bit more about that process when I show my Photoshop. So you're going to have a talk or breakdown with your director or whoever's in charge of the scene and discuss what you want, okay. That's really important because you all have to be on the same page. You can't just go off and invent something if it's not going to fit with the style of the film or the project that you're working on, right? Very, very important. Now that we just mentioned about research, we have to do lots of research. So if you're doing a scene with two fighting, swashbuckling sword fighters, okay, which is essentially what a lightsaber battle is, go look at sword fights. Really, go look at that. Anime, live action, go to a kung fu studio if you have the access to people who actually really know how to use that stuff, like martial arts. Great, do that, okay? Research it. Look at books, whatever you got to do, comic books. Do every kind of research and make notes. You want to take mental notes of what's going on and actually create a file, if you can, about the stuff that you're researching, okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to do a series of rough passes. And this is where I say you rough it out in thumbnails. Now, if you haven't done this before, it's a very simplified drawing that, bring this up again. In fact, I'll show it larger in my Photoshop. But I did it on a piece of paper, okay? This is a classic 8.5 by 11 pencil on paper method, okay? It's cheap, it's fast, it's simple, okay? In fact, while we're doing that, why don't I just go ahead and bring it up and so you guys can see it. This is page 1 of what we're doing here, and I'll add this. And let me make this a little bit larger on my screen here. So hopefully you guys can see this, okay? You see how simple these drawings are? All right, look, this is Dooku. Now I have my own shorthand of doing this, and then in from the top comes Ventress in the background, and they look at each other, there's a dialogue exchange, and I just quickly wrote the dialogue here. This is just enough for me to pitch to the director. In fact, this red over here is Giancarlo's notes that he drew on top of my thumbnails, and I think he wanted him to extend his lightsaber there. So now it's off the frame, so I probably have to reframe down. I can't remember if we did that or not in the final version. So then they attack and they come out here. Now this one where I have the post-it is one I'll show you. That's a very interesting shot that I was doing a lot of research and I really like something that I found. And so this is the one that I pulled out. And so the rest of it is just action, 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 and just a quick and simple drawing. Look how rough this is. It's not very defined at all. In fact, I probably, looking back at this was, man, it's got to be going on at least 10, 15 years now in the past that I did this back in the day, okay? Yeah, this is the old school Clone Wars style. And what happened here is like, I just probably blowing through this within, I don't know, maybe it might take me an hour, 2 hours to do this whole page. And you might say, well, it took you that long to do these little simple drawings, but most of the time spent is thinking. It's that whole thinking process, okay? So let me get back to the slides so that we understand a little bit more of the process. You rough things out in a thumbnail, and then you're going to tighten things up in multiple passes. And I'll show you that with breaking down one of the shots that we're going to do here, okay? That's how you're going to do the basic action method. Now, it gets deep for this. Now, you have to do, there's a lot of layers here, but I just want to tell you about the basics. This is, if you have just in your mind, this is the general way of doing it. Is there anything I missed here, Chad, you think that I want to add to this one?
I think in terms of the basic action method, I think this is all good. There's some other things we'll probably bring up and talk about as you're going through it. Things like giving your space and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, pacing too.
Yeah, and how you're dealing with pacing. But we'll get that yeah, we're about to go into that kind of stuff here. So
All right. So let me continue with dueling action. These are just some general tips that I see all the time that I want you guys to keep in mind. Okay. Keep the staging alive and moving. What this means is you have two characters in a set, in a location. They could be anywhere, right? Imagine two sword fighting people. They're on a cliffside, for example. You know, are there trees in the background? You know, if it's on a cliff, you know, what does the edge look like? Is there water down below? Is it just like dirt and rocks? Like, what is it? There's going to be a location, okay? Now, the thing that you want to avoid is just having them sit there and, you know, hit a sword back and forth. You know, that's not fun. That's not exciting. That's not visually dynamic. What you want to do is keep the staging alive and moving. So one of the things that I do, one of the tricks that I really rely upon, excuse me, is moving the characters throughout the location, throughout the set. So whatever set they're in, I want them moving. And I want them going up and I want them going down. Some of the coolest action scenes that I've seen with like Jet Li and Jackie Chan. If you think of any Jackie Chan scene, he is always bouncing around, just going up, going down, through ladders, through floors, through different levels of buildings, you know, in and out of cars. Like, it's so exciting the way that they stage up. It's really creative and very, very cool stuff. And that's the things that I want you to think about. So often I see people approach a scene and they're hitting each other back and forth, or it's like a boxing match where they're in a ring. Even in a boxing match, you can make them move around the ring in a very interesting way. That's very, very important, okay? Now, originality with poses and choreography, that's the next big tip. So it's not just about like, okay, average sword fight. No, you want to make it cool. Are they doing it with one hand? Are they going to do it with their foot? Like, how are they going to do that, right? If you click on that Samurai Champloo reference that we have on our event page, that clip, there's one where he blocks it with his sandal. He blocks like a strike with a sword with his, like, I forgot what that Japanese sandal is called, but it's awesome. He's got like a metal plate on the bottom. How creative is that? That's somebody thought of that. That's so cool. Okay, go ahead.
To this end on this though, you also want to make sure when you're dealing with your posing and your choreography that you know your characters inside and out, right? You're talking about the Samurai Champloo character doing the sandal thing. That is something that is well within that type of character, that particular character's personality to be able to do that, right? But you're not going to see, you know, going back to my Die Hard reference, you're not going to see John McClane suddenly throw down like 50 backflips to get some space.
He's not a martial artist,
super
right?
Cool, right?
He's a brawler, right? Kind of guy.
He's a brawler. So your action sequences need to fit into what that personality, what their style is, while still keeping that originality and creativity.
Great, man. So awesome. Yeah, those such cool tips. Okay, so working down the list here, let me go back to this. So shot variety and dynamic camera angles. What I'm referring to here is that, you know, if you're moving characters throughout the scene, going up and down like that, you're just naturally going to have opportunities to place your camera in cool positions. You want to have the camera low to the ground because it makes for interesting angles. You can raise the camera up high and point things down. The lenses that you choose are also important. So you can have wide angle lenses and you have narrow, long lenses, right? And so this creates different effects and you should know about that stuff. So if what I'm saying here is not familiar to you, this is the stuff you got to learn and look it up and figure it out, okay? Because your action scenes are going to improve by doing this. And then the last tip I have on here, the bullet point, is stage the action in depth. So many times I see people doing just sliding people across the screen in profile. They're not coming at the camera or going away from the camera. So when I punch somebody, I want to come in, pow, like right next to the camera. When I block it, I want, you know, when somebody's running away, I want them like starting like close to the camera and running away, right? So the size changes. Okay, so you could do stuff here and then you pull back and you see how there's a difference. Even with the camera that I'm using here, it creates that change of size and dynamic angles of depth going at the camera and going away from the camera. So I use that method a lot when I'm doing my breakdown and poses. Okay, so back to my Photoshop, and let me zoom out just a little bit and I'll give you the idea of what the scene is all about. Okay, so I have the script here, and I just want to read it to you guys because it's actually quite short. So this is all about Dooku versus Ventress in one of the episodes where Savage Opress, if you guys remember this episode where, we've introduced with this monster character that was trained by Ventress, okay? At any rate, she has a standoff with Count Dooku. And in one scene that I got, we have it, and if you look at the script, there's like notes at the top that are handwritten. That's like screen direction that says left to right. So I'll read this off. So Dooku rounds a corner in the hallway and walks towards camera, almost filling the screen with his head. As he approaches the camera into a close-up, we hear a voice behind him. The camera adjusts to reveal Asajj Ventress. Line number 138, Ventress. Leaving so soon, Master. Dooku, you are no match for me without the aid of your monster. That remains to be seen. As you wish. They have like a little bit of a back and forth there. Then the next line. Ventress and Dooku lock in combat once again. It should be clear that Dooku is the stronger, more superior Sith warrior. That's all they say about the action in this script, okay? There's nothing more of like, okay, they're going to jump, they're going to flip, you got to move them. None of that. That's up to you as a storyboard artist to create the scene. Now, there's a cutaway. It goes to a different scene, and I had to do that too, but then I'm just focusing on the Dooku and Ventress battle. Coming back, more of a description says, Dooku battles Ventress. He is clearly winning. He strikes her back as she attacks wildly. Her over-aggressive nature is predictable to Dooku, and he uses the Force to smash her up against the wall, holding her there off the ground against the wall, then zapping her with lightning, letting her smoke, and then her body drops to the ground. Dooku steps forward towards the beaten opponent and towers over her. As he approaches, through the pane, Ventress eyes one of the hatches on the floor, which leads to an escape pod. Time to end this once and for all. So he's like towering over her, and he's about to strike and kill her. And as Dooku moves to deliver the killing blow, Ventress rolls out of the way and uses the Force to open the hatch and leap into it, sliding down the chute into an escape pod. Okay, so there is much more of a description of the action, which does help, because there's points that you can play off to do that. Okay, so keep that in mind. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but I do want to get to this, and I'll describe the action again and again. So let's get to the thumbnails. All right, Chad. So here's what happens. This is my interpretation of the script. Now I worked this out with the director over various passes, but this is the rough pass. Rough. This is the first start, essentially, of what's going on. So Dooku here, Ventress comes down from the ceiling. That's a change that we made probably based on the location or the set, because it says that she comes around the corner, but apparently she just pops out of the ceiling. There's a hatch there, okay? And then they have that leaving so soon. They have that exchange. Dooku in this reverse shot turns on his lightsaber. Then Ventress comes out, and that remains to be seen. And she's got two lightsabers, right? And she attacks with that. Now this shot, which starts with the post-it note here, is a POV camera. Imagine like a GoPro camera attached to the sword. Now the sword is like coming around. It's like running on the bottom of the floor, and all of a sudden comes up and is about to strike Dooku's head and cut his head off. Right. So we see that like sword camera is basically what it is that comes up here, and that's what these three thumbnails represent. And she says, or Dooku says, "As you wish." As he turns around and sees that, we cut out wider, and we see that Dooku ducks it, right? He evades that strike. Ventress jumps and lands on screen right. So they begin the scene where Dooku's on screen right, and then now there's a screen direction change with the characters flipping sides of the screen from one side to the other. We see that on screen. Okay, so that's another method of creating visual interest, is using that screen direction method. Excuse me.
Something that somebody else brought up earlier, they were talking about how, directors or whatever, wondering why directors are so averse to going close. It's not necessarily that directors are averse to going close. We just want to make sure that those close-ups mean something, right? Your exteriors or your wider stuff, like we're seeing here, showing you the action and getting you into what's going on. But then all of a sudden you get something like the POV shot, which comes in between where all that wide stuff comes in, and we're utilizing this. And Sergio's creating a specific moment or atmosphere that creates tension, utilizing that close-up that's coming in before, bam, we come right back wide to see the action again and see it in its fullness. Because being close-up and trying to do the action, you're going to miss a lot of things. So we want to come back wide to be able to have that and really sell the action itself. But those close-ups are integral to setting the tone and feel and emotion of what that wide shot's going to end up doing.
Yeah, don't forget about your close-ups. That's like really, really important. It's also good for impact shots. So let's say you have a sword strike or a fist blow, show the punch, show where it lands, have it land on the chest and you see that fist real close up and where it lands. And then you cut out wider to the reaction and the audience feels that pain not so much more. The actor would be like, they give that pose of the blow, but that close-up is really what's going to sell it. Okay, so anyway, this first section, this is what happens. There's a little bit of a duel, and they essentially walk out from the screen. They go out from screen left to screen right, and that initiates a cutaway to another section. Okay, so the rest of this page is another section. Let's go to the next page of thumbnails, where we go back to that Dooku-Ventress fight. We go up here. Excuse me. Recovering from a little sniffle, so you have to pardon me. Okay, so we had a cutaway. Now we come back to the scene, and just as they left they left the screen. Now they enter the screen they left from left to right. Now they enter again, also from left to right. And so this is Ventress as she's backing up, right, backpedaling, and she's got like one sword in front of her and the other one in the back. And then in comes a strike from Dooku. Now he's really taking it. He's really doing it hard because he's going to really knock her down. He's really kind of angry about what's going on. There's been a buildup throughout this whole episode of them going at it. So let me readjust this, and we'll go to the next section here. So he strikes here. We cut out wider, and we see where they are. They're in like a corridor within like a Star Wars type ship, and it's got like these kind of hexagon or weird shaped walls. It's not just like a square. And so they're going around the corner essentially, and she's getting knocked down, but she's defending herself. So in this particular shot, there's a strike. She gets knocked down here, okay, and then she runs towards the camera, and we see the side of the corridor wall. Okay, that's what this is. And this is a very loose and quick drawing. I'll show you how I developed this a little bit more in the next pass. And so what happens is Dooku strikes the wall. He gives a sword blow here. Ventress runs up the wall like an athlete, right? And she basically just does a kind of like 180 running across the ceiling and jumping around and jumps towards the camera. Okay, lands closer to the camera essentially, and then again they have a little bit of an sword exchange. But then Dooku, what he does here in this frame, he does an anticipation with the Force. So one hand he's using the lightsaber, but then they've got more tricks, and somebody like Dooku is going to use the Force, and he charges up and then delivers his Force blow and knocks her back out of frame. Okay, that's what happens here. None of that is really in the script. It does have the part where he zaps her. That's called out, and that's later on in the scene. You can see where we made him use his Force lightning powers. Anyway, so she goes out of frame, and then we cut, and she comes into the frame, and she lands up against the wall. Dooku continues, and continues to battle, and then he does another one of these kind of Force throws where he like pushes her off to the side. She goes off screen, and we cut out wider. And this is like a medium wide shot where he pushes her up against the wall with the Force, okay? And then I had her just, the script calls for this, but she's hanging from the ceiling basically, and or from the top of the wall. Now look at this note here from director Giancarlo Volpe. He said, disarm her. He said, have him do one of these things where he like signals with his Force hands, excuse me, which what that does is it removes her lightsabers from her hands. Okay, so he added that little thing in there, which I thought was really great. And then here he basically just continues, holding her up and walking towards the camera. And then he does another charge, and that's where he uses his force lightning to zap her. And you see this, and I made her into a skeleton, to kind of just signify that she's getting zapped. I think I might have put that in the story. Actually, no, I didn't, because this was actually in a 3D previs type of thing. But if I were doing a storyboard, I would have like flashed a skeleton in there just for fun. I do that. I've done that before. I love that kind of stuff. Anyway, he zaps her with the force lightning. She falls out, and let's go to page 3 with the thumbnails, just so we finish up this scene. And she falls down, and this is her POV as it pans over, and it sees the hatch that was called out in the script. And then it pans up to Dooku, who's like standing over her, okay? And he's like, once and for all, we've got to end this once and for all, I think is the line of dialogue. He pulls up his sword, his lightsaber, he's about to like chop her in half. And then she looks up and sees that as he comes down with his lightsaber blade, she uses the last remaining energy of her force power to like, to like hold off that lightsaber edge, right? So now, I think you've seen this before, Chad. You see these like ninja movies where I think is like a little exaggerated, but you see like a super ninja who like grabs the sword in his hand, right? And he does this and he's holding it right before him. Mm-hmm. I was trying to referencing those kinds of things that like, I'm sure we've seen this in many movies now. Like I remember it back in the 80s when they used to do this stuff. But at any rate, she can't touch a lightsaber because that would chop her fingers off, right? So
it's also really close to being like the false finish where everybody thinks somebody's going to get ended in a thing where the person lifts up, because you have the shot where they're lifting up, you got them coming down, right? The only difference between this other type of shot and what you're doing is you have the extra thing of that the character is actually causing it. But in the one I'm thinking of is where they think they're going to die or lose, and then all of a sudden when it comes down, it hits next to them, which is what you're doing here. But the only the addition you added isn't that, but this was actually a strike to kill, and Ventress had to do something to prevent it, but basically to create him hitting the lightsaber next to her rather than in her face.
Yeah, so that blade comes down, for example, there's a little bit of a gap. You see that, I drew that in a close-up where like they don't actually touch, but she's using that force power to push the blade over. Like she can, I figure that she just has enough energy at this point to just push that blade. She pushes it next to her. Oh, excuse me. And the lightsaber actually hits a pipe that is next to her. Now, this gets a little bit more defined in the actual set that we did in my later passes, but for thumbnails, this was fine. I think I even added a close-up here just to make sure that it was clear to the audience. Now, this is just a rough pass, so some of this might have changed from the final one. But what happened is that it unlocked some steam that ended up blocking Dooku, and it like distracted him, pushed him back. And that's enough of a distraction for her to get up and use the and this is actually simplified. The final version is a little bit more elaborate. I like how it turned out. She uses the force to open up the hatch. She actually grabs her lightsabers again, because that's something that I don't remember who mentioned it, but or maybe I even realized, oh man, she can't leave without her lightsabers. You would never want to do that for a Jedi or a Sith, right? That's their weapon of choice. In fact, Ventress has like these curved lightsabers. So she grabs the lightsabers before she jumps into the hatch, and she falls in there. And then just before Dooku can come get her, she gets into the hatch, and that's the end of that scene, basically. Okay, so. All right, I know just in the nature of time, let me keep moving here, and I'll show you a little bit.
There's a question that I'm also going to bring up here real quick.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. So
I'll give you a chance to sip some water.
Just wondering, how do you guys visualize how many frames or thumbnails you want each scene or fight clip to fit with? And this is, when we're talking about storyboarding, this really is going to depend. You need as many panels to tell the story. Then when you start getting into things like animatics where you need to add some extra B poses, then the animators will come in and do in betweens or whatever, right? But as far as us, it's as many panels as you need to tell the story. If we go back to what you were showing there, you look at like when he's stabbing down the lightsaber on Ventress, Sergio only used like 2 panels to sell it, one with the hands and one with it being knocked to the right. Whereas other sections, such as like a flip or something, they take 4 or 5 panels to tell it. Just really depends on what you're trying to tell for the story. Sergio?
Yeah. Thanks, Chad. Thanks for the clarification. That is the answer. You do as many as you need to sell the sell the story. I want to bring this up. This is the actual animatic story reel that we created. This is not the final layout. This is actually a story process that we were experimenting with on that production, which creates the storyboards in 3D. So it's a previs essentially. And I'll just like step forward here to show you the different like poses. I don't want to play it because again, we got to be YouTube friendly with this. But this is where Dooku pops in, okay? And Ventress comes out in the back. And I'll just show you the beginning part because this is where they have the little dialogue exchange. And I don't see the lens numbers, but I do remember some of the lenses that I chose. Basically what we're doing here is using the real set and the characters within that set. And if you notice too, look how tilted the camera is. It's really off kilter. Okay, I did this on purpose because we're setting up that there's something going to happen here. So I don't want the camera just perfectly level at this point. Okay, so they finish up their dialogue exchange. This is the shot that I'll show you that basically I ripped off from Samurai Champloo. Okay, so this is what I wanted to get at with the reference that we use. I'll go back to the event page just to show you guys. I want you to, on your own when you're watching this, you see this reference, click on the scene. It should start up. It starts about like minute 3 minutes and 20 seconds in to this particular example of Dooku versus Ventress, okay? And then you'll see that shot where she pulls out her lightsaber and it's got the lightsaber cam, okay? Now, click on the Samurai Champloo, Mugen versus Jin, and that first fight with these two characters, there's this one shot that I thought was so cool, which when they go at it, Mugen has a sword and they do the same camera move, right? And he comes up and it's just so beautifully executed and it goes by so fast. It's literally like maybe, 16 frames. It's really, really quick. I think it's less than a second. And it's that camera move, and with anime, you know how they do things so flashy. It's just strike, 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 strike after that. And then they slow it down. So the pacing there is really, really cool. So this is why I brought up these two things. Now, I directly ripped this off from Samurai Champloo. I used the reference. Now, I'll say rip it off, but I'm using it as inspiration for a different duel. And this is something I would think is okay. It's like acceptable here. Now, I even had to bend the rules here. This camera lens that I'm using is about like a 10 millimeter. I even remember this, that we weren't allowed to use camera lenses that wide. It's like so extremely wide. But it made sense with this particular shot because it was that like kind of GoPro style, sword cam. And in the final, which you'll see on the event page, with the final animation, they did a pretty good job of animating the scene. And I thought it came off pretty good. So let me go back here. A little bit of water for my throat. Okay, so going forward, this is where I want to get to. I'm going to get to the demo part right now. They come into the shot. Excuse me. This is the shot where I want to get at. You see this posed out, it's very kind of stiff in 3D, but what we are using are accurate cameras, and we're using that set. So you see this is the part that I mentioned in the thumbnails where she climbs up the wall. Let me back it up a little bit. And she, you see her like her foot comes up on the side of the wall and she like flips around and they strike at each other. And then, whoops, I did it too fast. He uses the force here and pushes her away, okay? So now I did this in 3D, but now if I'm going to do it in 2D, I want to show you my demo method. So are you guys ready? Are you guys ready for the Photoshop? Chad, you still awake?
I'm
we're
still
gonna make this
awake.
happen.
So what we're going to do here while you're doing your demo, you're going to do your drawing. Those of you who have questions, feel free to toss them in the chat. I'm going to try and cover as many questions, me and Sergio, while he's doing this demo. But
Yeah.
he's gonna go through and draw some of this stuff as we're going. All right. So yeah, make sure you throw your questions in there. I do want to start off with one while you get started. Something somebody brought up earlier was like, man, in an hour, it takes me hours to do my drawings. Yes, I know we're doing this in an hour, but there's no way this takes Sergio in general
Oh yeah.
an hour.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
takes
this
a
would
lot
take me
longer than that.
a long time. Yes. And how long would it take? It's probably about maybe two, maybe 2 to 3 working days. So that's 8 hours a day. We're talking about 16 to 24 hours would probably take me to do this scene. Okay. So that's a long time. Think about that. Takes a while. Good things take time, right? So anyway, first thing.
You start your drawing, and I'm going to hit questions here, but just do your drawings and stuff and do the demo. And if there's things we want to talk about in between, we'll definitely do that.
Just a reminder what I'm going to show people. I'm going to break down one of the shots, how I would do this in storyboards, and using Photoshop to do it. Okay, so I'm going to pick this shot here where they come around the corner and there's a couple strikes. Ventress climbs up the wall, flips around, and then at the end, Dooku uses his force power to push her out of the shot. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing here. This is the thumbnails for it. Let me bring this up. Now, this is a template. I'm going to show people what this is all about. This is just a template I made that has like a bunch of things on here. Real quick, I think we have this somewhere on our website. We'll have to make sure that you guys can get this. So it basically has a bunch of masks, but in the end, if you pull off all these things that it has on here, really what I'm getting at is it's either a 16:9 or a 2:3:5 aspect ratio box. Okay, and I'll leave that 2:3:5 on, and it's got a background layer. So let me go in and start drawing. You'll notice a couple of things about my Photoshop. I have it set up that everything's on the right side because I'm right-handed. I basically just use my brush tools here, and if I don't really play around with too many settings. I just pick the standard brush. It's fine. It's fine for me. And so I got my brush tools. Okay. Then I have my layers on this side, and then I have up here swatches. It's a series of grays that I can quickly pick. The different colors that I can use to draw with, okay? And, if I need a red, I can go ahead and do red. Now, the fancy things that I've got on here are my actions. So I've created here, there's an action menu with inside Photoshop where, for example, I have one that says select all and delete. It selects everything inside of the frame, and it basically clears it out. That's just one thing that I created just to make it fast. Now, I'm sure other people have other methods of doing this. That's just one way I've done it, okay? Now, at the bottom, I'll point you guys to the animation timeline. This is a new feature within Photoshop. Now, I used to do this in Photoshop using layer comps. That's another thing here. This particular thing is you can kind of take a snapshot of the different layers, and then you can step through it to create sequential art. I think with the addition of this timeline, I found it easier to use timeline to do it sequentially, so that it has a timeline now. So hopefully this makes sense, all right? Now there's a couple other cool buttons I have here that I'll show you about, but as I go through it and use it, I'll let you know what that is.
We have a on the page, that video that says how Sergio uses Photoshop. He goes through a step-by-step of how he uses his actions in here, as well as there is a link in there that provides you so you can download the actions that he's going to be using in this demo if you would like to utilize it. That way, people want to take a look at it, it's going to be there for them, and you can just focus here on the demo side. And they can look at that video. While we're at it, let's jump into some questions. So the first one was from Jean-Claude asking about some 3D stuff here. Let me pull it back up. Get to here. He's saying, in terms of animatics, how do you import the camera animation pass that was made in a 3D software into a Storyboard Pro and draw over the top of the footage? Somebody already brought this up that you can't really draw over the top of footage in Storyboard Pro. Storyboard Pro actually has an engine in it for 3D if you want to utilize it to bring in 3D assets and stuff and create storyboards utilizing it and utilizing our 3D camera. But most of the time, if you're working in Blender or you're working in Maya, you're working in Unreal, whatever 3D thing you're working on, you're just going to do pretty much all of it in there. Blender has a grease pencil that allows you to do it already. So there's no real need to export out into another program to draw on top of it because you can already do it in Blender itself. I hope that answers your question there, JC.
Cool. Thanks, man. So, okay, basically what I'm doing here is I'm roughing out the background of where I'm going to place these characters. And there's a couple things I did that if you notice, I know I'm doing this fast. So I'll show you the step-by-step process in different versions of the files that I have. But I'm kind of laying out where all the characters are going to be. Now, there's one thing that I did here in the layers is I created a perspective grid. I made it in a non-photo blue, and I have a shorthand like action button to change the opacity of that layer just really quickly. I can bring it down 20%. So this is basically a guide that I can use to move around a little bit. And that's the horizon line that I usually put in my shot, okay? Then on another layer, I made my background. Now, one of the things that I notice here is like, I'm gonna want to move these characters in the background, and then I'll take this frame and I'm gonna use this frame just to show you what I mean by this, is that, whoops, I have the layer locked. Give me a sec here. So then I use this frame to recompose. So like where it is, where this frame is just a general guide for this particular shot, but it's really going to be moving around differently. And I notice, oh, I don't have enough room in this particular canvas. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is go up here to canvas size and make this thing much larger. So let's make this 4,000 pixels, and I'll make this one about 25,000 pixels in height, and then boom, you got that, and you create a new thing. So then what I'm going to do is fill in the background. One thing that I like to do is always draw with a kind of gray background to start, because I don't like to use just a white. So here's that. Now actually, let me make this a little bigger. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. And there's that. Okay, so let me continue roughing this out. Now on this timeline feature, I'll show you how to use that in a second. But basically, I need another layer, and this is what I'm gonna call this. And I like to organize my layers when I'm doing this stuff. It just takes a second. I'll just call it character 1. Okay, CHAR1, basically. And here's where go back to my brush tool, and I'll start blocking this out. So based on the thumbnails, I got the wrong color. So let me. Based on the thumbnails, if you remember this, like here are the poses that I'm going to use to start it off, okay? And it's just kind of references. I'll look back, okay, he's striking here. So let me go in and start doing this and see what that might look like. I'm just going to like block this in really quickly with basic shapes. He's got his lightsaber up in the air, and this is Dooku, and then Ventress, she's like pulling back, so maybe she's off balance, okay? Her arms are coming out here, and I'm just getting like general proportions and just general shape of what's going on, okay? And then I need another keyframe pose. I know when I want them coming forward, and I know I want her like up against the wall. So, actually I'll show this in a new animation frame. So one cool thing that using the timeline, I have an action button that I did this already. When I click this, what it does, it creates a new timeline frame, and it creates a new layer so that it reduces the opacity of the previous layer. Now what this does, it creates an automatic onion skin. Watch what happens when I click this. Boom, okay? I got a new animation frame, and it brought the opacity down for the previous layer. So now what I can do is I can go in and draw this. Oh, and I'll go ahead and rename this character 2. This is my layer here that I want to do it. And then, I want Ventress here, the foreground. Maybe I'll have it like she's kind of bent over, but I want her foot like up against this wall. And, maybe her swords are out, something like that. And then Dooku's in the background, like ready to strike. So maybe, he's got his his swords out there. You know, why not have good silhouette even in these like roughed out poses. Now I'm basically blocking out the movement of where I want this shot. And this is where I say the 2-3-5 box, I might in this next frame might want to adjust it over here. So now I also have a hotkey set up where I can go back and forth, and you kind of have to turn off the layers as you do this. But so now you can see that let me turn this off. Can you see how the camera is also readjusting to the new composition of these characters? Okay, and I'll do one more. How are we doing on time? Okay, we got about 10 or so minutes, right? Maybe we can go a little bit over as I show you this. So I'm going to speed this up, and we're going to move to the next step. How's that? So the next thing I want to do here is save. Okay, so save as is super important. Now you guys might think, well, why are you showing me this? Let me tell you, my friends, if you've ever lost a file, you will remember me, because I'm going to tell you, you got to save all the time. So I'm just going to save it version up, Dooku versus Ventress storyboards, and that way you have a record of it. It's working. Okay. So let me pull up this shot. Everybody with me on this? You understand what I'm doing? Does this make sense, Chad?
Yeah.
All right. So here are the fighting poses. This is what I've already blocked out. Okay. A couple of things that I've done that I'll show you. Excuse me. Is I've already created that background. I put a little more detail in it. It's just black and white line. There's nothing too special. If you notice that it's got that that non-photo blue perspective grid, and I blocked out these characters here. Now look how many. I've got 16 poses for this one particular shot that I have here, and now I'm going to run through this with my hotkey button. They come at the camera, and he gives her that force push. Okay, so strike here. Ventress falls down. Okay, she gets up. She starts running up against the wall here. Here's where the strike comes in from Dooku. She like rolls over like an athlete, and or like a half pipe skateboarder, and then she kind of takes a new position in front of the camera. You know, I composed it so that it's somewhat there. Now, keep in mind that frame, I'll be adjusting this as the shot goes through, okay? And anyway, there's a strike here that she hits him with like 2 swords at the same time, right? He blocks it with 1, and this is where he anticipates the anticipation pose, and then he's gonna do his force push, boom, knocks her out. Let me see if I can shrink this down just a little bit. Knocks her out of the frame, and then she's out. Basically, I put these like cartoon swoosh lines to like knock her out of the frame. Okay, so this is how rough I will block this out. Now, I'm now creating my storyboards. This is my storyboard rough pass. How long did this block out take me, this like rough pass? It literally took me, I don't know, maybe an hour, okay, maybe less, because it's rough. I mean, look how fast, look how simple. I'm not worrying about detail. The only detail is like the background, but that's relatively simple, okay? So now I'll go clean this up and add tones later, but this is the start. Okay, does that all make sense?
Yeah, it took you an hour to do this one shot. So
this one shot.
It takes time. It does take, even when we're doing roughs and thumbs, it takes time, right? Between researching and between looking into it and doing your drawing, putting your drawings down and getting the composition right. It does take time. It's not going to be something that's going to be like, oh, I'm done in 5 minutes, and suddenly you've got a scene. It takes a while to get that stuff down. I'd like to jump into some more questions here now.
Go for it. Yeah, right. and I'll show you the next process of what we do here in this as you pull up a question. So go for it, Chad, and I'll show you this.
This next one is from Manuela, asking about the theme of empathizing with the characters, so that the action scene means something and engages the viewer. How can this connection be achieved in a short time during the action? This is all going to come down to pacing, and it's going to come down to your use of shots. We're talking about here, you're not going to get a lot of empathizing with your characters currently in this scene, that the specific shot he's doing, right? It's all about getting the action. But if we were to take this further in, right, and he does that the force shot, maybe when she falls down, Ventress falls down, we would get up close. The roll across, there'd be a maybe small point in time where she's on the ground, like taking a moment, trying to catch herself, and then Dooku maybe slowly walks up to try and be more intimidating or whatever. this little moment allows us that time to empathize, right? It's almost like I saw somebody who made a mention of Kung Fu Panda. Very similar type of sequence would be like Tai Lung versus Master Shifu. They did this exact thing in there where they had this really crazy action sequence that went on, but then in the end, as they needed to set the emotional tone of it to prep for Poe's entrance, they knock Shifu down, and there's this slow drawing moment in between the action that has him on the ground, and as Tai Long is coming up, going, "I want my scroll," and stuff. Right? And that builds that emotional context and builds that weight that we wouldn't have otherwise if it was just a fight and he looks up and finds the scroll's gone and goes, "Where's the scroll?" and then throws him off to the side and just keeps fighting Poe later on, right? What do you think?
Well, actually, you know, I think it's a great explanation. Just with the nature of time, though, I want to move on and show this pass, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And we can get back to those things there too. But thanks, Manuel. I think that's really, really awesome. I just want to show you guys what I do when I actually clean up the boards. So that's the rough layout, like rough initial blocking of what I did that particular shot. And I'll continue the process, right? So this done in like iterations and layers till I'm actually ready. So I have this like button that I call blue line. And I'm on character 4 layer. You see that? This is what that really rough pass was. I click this one. What it does, it creates a new layer, and the previous layer, it like turns it blue. It's basically, you know, there's different programs have different functions, but it's basically made a blue line for what I did. Now I'll go in there and I'll like I said, I'll name the layer. I'll call this CH4 just to make it quick. And then I'll go back and with my brush tool, make sure I'm on the right layer. And then I'll go in and start drawing and clean this up. In fact, my brush is a little bit too big for how zoomed in I am on this. So let me go in and clean this up and brush. Okay, so then I'll show you how quickly I really like block out these characters. This is like, now I'm going to go in with a more solid line. Okay, hopefully I can draw and talk at the same time. But this is Ventress, and you know, just a quick indication of her body and where her hands are. She's still holding on to her lightsabers, so I'm just going to do something like this. You know, I'll probably slow it down if I had more. You know, if I were working by myself and I'm not trying to do this like demo, but you know, I'm trying to find decent silhouette of where all the body parts would be. But like here is one of the swords that I'll have her grab. You know, it doesn't have to be like 100% perfect. This is where I say like the roughness of a storyboard can really help. And then Dooku is back here, and he's also got, so basically what he's got his like swords up. Basically what I'm working towards is finding the major silhouette of the actual pose, okay? And I'll just try and clean this up as quickly as possible for the purposes of this demo, but this really is about as much as I'll do here. And let me see what the previous frame is. Yeah, I'll probably push his right foot forward and the other one back. And, you know, just a little bit detail on the body shape. And this is such a zoomed out pose that you really just need the big general shapes of where the head and the body are at. Now, once I got that, like basically the blue line that I need there is fine. I can erase it, and then this is what's left, okay? And then what I'll do in another layer, I'll actually put a tone behind it, but you know, maybe something like this. And then if I, so the layers are all turned on with this, the new layer that I've created is automatically visible in all of the frames. So I have to go back and actually turn this off. So this is one of the disadvantages of this method that I have here. But once I turn it off, I'll show you what that's all about. And here, turn this one on. Okay, so you see that there's a little bit of a change of position, and you know, could use a little more cleanup of coming in this way, but that's basically all I'm doing. And so going forward, this is what I've done with some of these particular poses. Let me turn this layer 4 off and zoom out a little bit. So this is like the anticipation pose of where he does his strike, and then the next one forward is where he does his like force push. Okay, so this is about as clean as I will clean up the actual outline line drawing. Okay, does that make sense? And the next thing that I will do here, in fact, I'll show you what I would do, is here on this particular frame, I'll go ahead and add another layer, and I'll call this like, I just usually call it color. Just that's my own little shorthand. But color 15, because I want to remember that it's for the layer 15. And I'll pick my tones here, and then I'll pick a bigger brush, like this one. And this is where, Dooku's a little bit darker, so we'll make that. And I'll go ahead and just fill in the tone, I'll just paint it in. And so then the background is like, goes away. Now I'll take my time doing this. So like right now I'm like coloring without the lines, but I'm just trying to be fast for the purposes of this demo, right? So does this make sense?
I'm trying to answer questions at the same time, just typing into chat, so that way we can make sure that some of those questions are answered.
I'm almost done with this part, so then we can go in together and we'll start answering questions. But then you see what I do here is basically that. In fact, I'll do it on the same layer. I'll maybe make Ventress a little bit darker, and that way I have the pen pressure opacity turned on with my Wacom tablet. So that's why you see like it's not completely solid on some of this stuff. But like I said, I'm going a lot faster than I normally would to like color this in. I usually want to be more careful and be within the lines here. And if you mess up, you just go back and you erase it. No big deal. I'm on a different layer, so I can do all kinds of effects here that that come in and make it accurate. And then usually what I like to do with a lightsaber is, let me go to my brush tools. I'll pick a fuzzy brush, this one, and turn them white or red. How about this? Because it's it's Ventress. She's got like red. I forgot. There's like each Jedi has like a specific lightsaber color, but I'll just make Dooku's white, and then you put a little glow, so it's like it looks like it's glowing on there. And that's basically what the finished storyboard panel would look like, okay? And that's basically it. So hopefully that makes sense. Now let me see, let me scroll through this again. I'll have to readjust my layers so that all of this is turned on in the right order. There we go. So that's what happens, and that's pretty much the finished storyboard panel. Okay, so quick and dirty method of how to block this out. Hopefully that makes sense of doing a lightsaber battle or any kind of action scene. And you want to do it quickly in different passes. I'm working in layers so that if I need to correct anything, then I go back and do it that way. Okay, so with that, what do you think? How does that compare to the method that you guys are doing? Is that something similar or different? Hopefully you guys learned some new tricks here. How about you, Chad? What do you normally use when you're doing this kind of stuff?
It varies for me. It depends on the project I'm doing. Toon Boom, I utilize Toon Boom a lot for some things. But when I'm working in Photoshop, I actually work very closely the same way that you do with the timeline tool, because one of the things with the timeline, when I'm dealing with boarding in Photoshop in general, the biggest pain in the butt that I deal with it is having to export out all my images. Anyways, it used to be, but because of the way that they have the timeline tool set up now, there's ways that you can do it where you can do a batch export using the timeline. I'll actually set everything that you have to one second. Like right now you have them all set to 0. I will make sure that they're all set to 1 second. And then when I go and I do my export, I'll just export JPEGs at 1 frame per second. And it just exports every single one of them all together in the naming I want it to be all at once. And it saves me a ton of time than having to open up my first one, save it out, open up the next one, save it out, right? Because Photoshop's not always been the best when it comes to exporting multiple images at once in a very clean and easy manner for sequential storytelling.
Yeah, layer organization is super important. And I think I did see somebody mention about, how you would export this from Photoshop. What I would probably do here, since I have it all on layers, I would export just the one Photoshop file and import that into like Adobe Premiere or Adobe After Effects, and then do my final like camera moves and stuff. So this is if I was actually going to create an animatic for what I'm doing here. That takes time, right? This is like very labor intensive stuff, okay? And this is to try and get that really nice polish on your animatic reel to really sell the scene. You really want to show this so that the animators who are going to animate this in the end really understand the action that you want in your scene. And so, yeah, I would go to all this extent of like bringing it into multiple programs and doing that just to make that shot right. And if you've seen any of my animatic demos in previous years, that's what I do. It will take me hours and hours to do it. I really enjoy doing that stuff. And, it's all within the time frame of doing the job. So if you only have 2 weeks, well, you got to do 2 weeks work and 2 weeks worth and sell your shot and do it that way. But there's many ways from Photoshop that you can bring this into other programs and make it really cool.
Yeah. So let's see if we can't get to a couple of quick.
Yeah, I know we've gone a little bit over on the time, but thanks guys for hanging out. Let's see if we can get to a couple more questions as we do this.
Yeah.
It was a really fast demo to get in there, but I want you guys to try out at least doing some action. I think you'll enjoy it, and hopefully, some of the tips that we thought about here will keep you in mind. And as you're bringing some of that up, shouldn't I mention, Chad, that if you want more of this stuff, you should come check us out. And I'll bring this up on screen too, is come join us in our intro course. Intro to Storyboarding course is free. You guys sign up to that for sure. And then right after that, join us in the forums. We have a Discord channel that we use, and you could get there by going to this link, StoryboardArt/forums, and then join the community. And if you have any questions, we're there to help.
Absolutely. And in that forums area, on top of having an area where we cover and do all of our intro course stuff, you get people that will review your work, taking a look at it. A few of those reviewers are actually in our chat today. Shout out JC, Jean-Claude Delaron is one of our mentors there. And we also do a lot of art challenges. And those art challenges are designed to help you get better at things like composition, perspective, visual storytelling, overall, all that kind of stuff. And that's all the stuff, that kind of things that we do in our Discord. So definitely come jump in our Discord, have some fun there. It's a really cool place. I can't emphasize it enough.
Oh yeah.
And
from this
yeah,
right.
It actually kind of went into one of the questions I was about to bring up here was, do you guys know a good resource for improving and understanding perspective? One is the cheap plug. Go to our Discord, go to our forum, because we're going to talk. We talked a lot about perspective and stuff there. Somebody else did bring up Marcos Mateo.
Marcos Mateo is awesome.
It's an awesome. There's 2 books. They're really dense, but they're really good in there for perspective in general. Framed Ink is also a really good one. Same guy, basically taking that into visual storytelling and not just the perspective. Those are all really good resources that you can utilize. And then otherwise, film, just study film, draw, do film studies and just draw scenes. You'll get it down in no time, because you'll learn how perspective works when certain lenses are being used. It's just like film study is one of the best ways you can learn anything that we do here.
Movies.
So. Great
question. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, there's a really great conversation going on in the chat that I'm looking at here too. A lot of questions about portfolios and do we have portfolio reviews? We do that on a regular basis. In fact, maybe we should mention some of the things that are coming up. I will say next month is going to be really, really exciting, because we're going to reveal the new mentorship session that's coming up. We're going to have another event. And if you guys are at all serious about improving your careers or getting into visual storytelling, want to get into the entertainment industry, or you think any of this stuff is valuable, helpful, or fun, we're here as the resource for that, okay? And you'll want to stick around for next month. We're going to have another special event talking about animatics and also about our mentorship program,
Yeah.
which Chad is a huge part of.
So for those of you who have been asking about how do I do this in animatics, we're going to be talking about animatics next time. And those of you who have been asking about AI, we had a huge discussion about AI last month. You can find that video on our YouTube. Don't want to jump into it for today because we're at the end, but a little cheap plug for that as well. I think we've looking through here for any other final thing. On the job, what would the timeline for an action sequence like this? How long would you usually have to be able to put this together? Oh, let me bring that up. It's from Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Tomas. It depends. It usually, it really depends on the production. For a TV show like The Clone Wars, I think we had 5 weeks, if I remember correctly, to do the whole episode among 4 or 5 artists. And so we would divide up the script between each of those artists. And I think I might have had like 5 to 7 script pages that I had to deal with. And what I showed you was one script page. It's almost like 3/4 of a script page. It's a little bit less than one script page. So I would probably spend about 1 week on this from start to finish, from actually doing thumbnails, getting approval from the director, and then executing my boards. I would probably do this in 1 work week, which is 40 hours essentially, right? And that's about a good estimate. It might spill over to the next week depending if it's like complicated action. Ironically, this scene, it really wasn't that complicated. There's only 2 characters. It's in one particular set. The previous scene is actually really complicated. If you want to see, the major fight, go rewind that reference that we have on the event page with Savage Press and Dooku and Ventress. There's a duel there that I also boarded out. They had 3 characters, well, really 4, because there's one that came in and just kind of went unconscious at the beginning of the scene. But there's a lot going around. There's a lot going on, staging and screen direction changes. And it's only in one set, but there is just a lot more characters to deal with, and the choreography was a little more complicated. So anyway, hopefully that answers your questions, Tomas. I think, it depends on the production, but really, you got to go as fast as you can.
All right, one more question here. We've talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to do this here. Where can beginners like me learn the cinematic language for communicating in storyboarding? This is a fantastic question because this is always what we want to do. Man. My immediate thing is study. Yeah, that's one.
Go to the intro course.
Go and do the intro. It's a good start to learning about it. Of course, once you've done that, if you're really into that and you're really going through it, we got our mentorship course that's going to be coming out in about a month for registration and stuff. Yeah. And on top of that, study film. Yes. Go and watch film. Draw what you see. You're going to get so much out of just doing that as well. You're going to learn so much about how we use visual storytelling. It's unbelievable, right? So definitely, that's my suggestions.
Yeah,
Sergio, any other suggestions?
I couldn't agree more. Come to the intro course. That'll help you out. That'll give you a kickstart into doing this, and then point you to other resources like movie reference that Chad mentioned, and maybe other artists that you can follow, and just get started. There's the intro course is free for a reason, so that there's no pressure. Okay, we're not grading you. It's all just for you improving, and there's really great artists there that you can learn from in that group, and in the community there. That's really, really fantastic. So highly recommended. Other than that, watch films. Watch films, buddy. Watch as many movies as you can. So
Absolutely.
I think it's a really good question, and it's probably a great thing to end on. I really appreciate everybody who came out to watch this demo. Hopefully it helped. And we'll post the reference links that we had in the description of the video after the fact. And hopefully you guys show us your examples. Keep in touch. Tell us what you're up to. And if you work on some cool action, I want to see it.
Absolutely. All righty, guys. Have a good one. See you
Thanks,
next
Chad.
time.
Appreciate you being here. And yeah, on behalf of us,
likewise.
have
Enjoy.
fun. We'll be out on a little bumper movie. We'll talk to you soon. See you guys. Bye.